questions do you have for me?
Do you believe that some dinosaurs survive by turning into birds?
By turning into birds? Well, that's a very, very good question, because dinosaurs and birds are related to each other, and there's actually someone here who specializes on that very topic, so that's a very good question. And yes, we have very different lineages or groups of animals that can be traced back to the dinosaurs, and birds are one of those groups. So yes, when you eat chicken McNuggets for dinner, you could be eating a dinosaur. What's your next question?
How did the birds survive?
How did the birds survive? Well, animals that lived in the past as animals that live today are dependent on their environment. So they need certain things in order to thrive, to do really well. And so sometimes that could be access to certain types of foods that they like to eat. And if there's a lot of those foods, an abundance of them, they can do really well. And if there's a shortage of it, where they live in a place where there just aren't enough food sources, then that can be a little bit harder to survive. There's other factors aside from food, and that can be due to the size and the shape of these animals, if they need a lot of food to eat or very little food to eat. Another way that animals cope is based on what other things could be a predator, or could be something that could harm them in some way. They could be food for someone else. And so if they live around those types of animals, then they could disappear more quickly. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay. For example, here in California we have...
Should I read this one or this one next?
Let her finish the follow-up though, honey.
You can pick. We can talk about more stuff later.
Did the dinosaurs die because of their size?
Did they die because of their size? That's a very good question. Some dinosaurs were really, really big.
That they couldn't fit in such small things like holes in trees.
Exactly. The sauropods especially got really gigantic, and that makes it a little hard to fit into holes, and especially holes of trees like you were saying. But yes, sometimes dinosaurs, because of their size, that can be a hard thing to live with. Other dinosaurs are very small though. You can have smallish looking dinosaurs. But what was your question specifically that you wanted to know about their size?
Well, I wanted to know if they died because of their size.
Because of that specifically? Because they were too big?
Mm-hmm, that there were, like, big, really, really, really big caves.
Oh, so they couldn't go and hide somewhere because they couldn't fit?
To get warmer.
To get warm or something like that?
And
okay.
I think that the sun only warms them, so if they go in a cave, they'll still be cold because caves are very, very cold.
So you're hitting on something very, very interesting. And it's known as, in mammals, we can be thermodynamic, or we can generate our own heat to regulate our body temperature, and reptiles aren't very good at that. And so there's been a lot of studies where people have sort of been interested in this topic. Can dinosaurs generate their own heat, or are they purely cold-blooded? And so some people recently take a look at that, and they analyze the bones, and they look at the structure of the bones and see if they can get information about that. And it turns out there might have been some warm-blooded guys out there roaming around. So their size and whether or not they can generate heat might not have been the reason why they died out. There are other environmental factors, which means that where they were living at the time could have been something that was detrimental to them, that was harmful. So things like comets or something exploding and creating a mass extinction happens. We have this also at the very end of the Cenozoic, where we have the end of our age of mammals, so to speak, where we have the Ice Age. Have you seen the movie Ice Age? No? Oh, you have some homework, girl. You should
Because
go
I
watch
don't
the
like
movie
really
Ice
scary.
Age. Oh, okay.
I like scary movies. But one time I watched the Blue Planet and saw a polar bear eating a little beluga.
Is that scary?
And a little wolf that is playful like Milo.
Oh, okay.
Shan said it was a little Milo.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we could get really big animals like wolves.
And the wolves took some of the food. I think one wolf took the rest of the beluga. Dug a hole, put it in.
Really? That must have been exciting to watch.
So, Maggie, what would a hypothesis be about the animals that are still alive today, based on what you just heard?
So we have some animals that lived a long time ago, but they don't live today. So they are known as extinct. But and then there are some things like whales and beluga whales specifically, and wolves, things like that, that we have in the fossil record, but they still live today. So that's something that's called extant. And in fact, in these cabinets, all behind me, are the skeletons of animals that live today, mostly mammals.
Oh, interesting.
And so we use that in our work here with the fossils to understand where the bones go and how large they are and what side. Are they on the left side of the body or the right side of the body? And so having a knowledge of what an animal looks like today can help us understand the animals that lived in the past and how closely related they were or how far apart related they were. So that is important. Yeah. Do you have any more questions?
Well, I don't really, because I think I read all the questions I'm supposed to read to you. What's at number 4?
Okay, what's number 4?
Were the survivors a smaller species?
Were the survivors a smaller species?
I think they were, because dinosaurs are really big.
Dinosaurs are really
But
big.
some are small, like birds.
Well, let me give you an example from the whales. Whales at one time were land-dwelling mammals, and they walked on 4 limbs. But then they evolved and they went into the water. And when they were in the water, they weren't really huge. They were pretty small. In fact, some of the whales that we dig up that are about 20 million years or so, their whole skull can fit in my lap. They're really small. They're about like that big, the back part of their skull. But today, how big is a whale? They're really, really huge, huh?
That skull cannot fit on you.
I know. They're really, really large. So it depends what group of animals they are. And for the whales, we had 2 large groups. We had the tooth-bearing whales, so whales that had big teeth. And then we had whales later on that were baleen, which means they had this big filter system going on, made of keratin, which is like the fingernail stuff, like a big bristle in their mouth, and they would filter out their food.
Okay. And these are some of the animals that survived, and I'll tell you what's on here.
Oh, okay.
84%
You can ask him too.
of marine
Take a seat, Hal.
families survived.
How many?
84 of marine families survived because they didn't need the sun so much, because some were in the dark layer of the ocean and they didn't need so much sun.
There are some animals that don't require a lot of sunlight, and they live really, really deep. We have these really cool deep sea fish. They're awesome. Like in Finding Nemo. Have you seen Finding Nemo?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
A long time. In high school.
Yeah. Do you remember the fish that was in the really dark part of the movie when Dory lost her mask? And she's swimming down, and then all of a sudden she can't see anything. And then there's this little light that starts to shine. Do you remember that?
No.
And then it gets really bright and he opens up his big jaws, and because it's a film, it's not quite realistic. They're only about this big in real life. But that's a type of deep sea fish called a bathyloid. That's a big long name. But they got these little lures on the front of their head, which are really cool.
And 82 land,
82%.
82% land vertebrates
Survived.
like
Yeah.
and like snakes, lizards, and crocodilians survived.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
can read
mammals,
this
too.
because I don't know what the heck that is.
Tuatara. And I'm sorry, which one? Maggie?
And mammals.
That one.
Mm-hmm. Mammal.
I can't read that one.
The gentleman just gave you another one.
Mammals.
What does it say?
Mammals.
Yep.
Right?
Mammals survive too.
And we're mammals.
Yes.
Maybe some cretaceous
I
what we're talking
see
about,
any.
right? What is it, the
I
Permian?
don't think I see any mammals
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Oh, well,
Trust me
mammals
on
are
that.
very
Well-
important.
Yeah.
Well, I think everyone's talking about mammals a lot, but I think I'm reading something else. Bees, clams, snails, lobsters, crabs, and shrimp, sharks, hagfish, and lampreys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both
What?
invertebrates and vertebrates.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you know what a vertebrate is?
No.
Okay, you're a vertebrate.
You're a vertebrate, right?
A vertebrate means that it's an animal with a backbone. So, if you put your hand on your back, you can feel all those different vertebrae, and together they make up your back. And for our paleontology purposes, we have lots of vertebrates that tend to fossilize. It's the bones that are really cool, and they tend to last. So we can get sharks and fish and amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals. Those are all
Hey.
vertebrates.
And
And the
whales and
dinosaurs.
dolphins.
They're part of the
And of
mammals.
course-
I didn't know whales.
As far as
That's
orders.
interesting.
And I don't think that animals can just last 100 years ago into the fur after the dust clears out, because I think they had to die, and then new ones, and then new ones, and then new ones.
Maggie, why don't you ask what your overall question, science fair question is, and let's see if we can get,
Why?
give them a frame of reference.
Why did the animals? Why do some animals that are living today live with the dinosaurs?
You want to start with that one?
How long you got? Well, lots of animals lived at the time of the dinosaurs. I mean, it wasn't just dinosaurs that were living then. Mammals actually lived at the same time dinosaurs did. But when the meteor hit and created the problem that the dinosaurs couldn't survive, the mammals were still generalized enough that they could survive that.
And they were small too.
They were
Because you were
small.
interested about size.
Yeah, they were small
That helped
and they
them.
were very simple animals. So they could
Didn't need to eat a
survive,
lot.
or they could eat several different things rather than one special thing. So they survived that event where the dinosaurs were too specialized, and they were big and they were cumbersome, but they were so specialized that they couldn't survive that. And that's why we have animals that survived that same event that killed off the dinosaurs.
Do you have any more questions? Mags, do you have any more questions?
Well, one, and it's not about the dinosaurs.
Okay, well then can you thank them for the tape and then we'll move on?
Yeah.
Thank